Ta-da-da-da-da-da. And all of a suddenly, bam! This bright blue sky fills the screen. Another amazingly well-constructed sequence. You almost feel as you already finished watching a movie. Actually, almost all we saw was the tapestry drawn with watercolor paint by humming Miyazaki. And bam, the blue sky. The clouds in this blue sky are pulled in a lateral direction at different speeds using the multi-plane mechanism like the one I mentioned earlier. They're pulled in different speeds so that we feel like we are seeing something magnificent. We see the sky, just the bright blue sky, but we can't help being a little moved by it. It just so suddenly appears. This transition between cuts, it's just amazing. A work of a true genius. It's for dramatically resetting the mood of the audiences. I mean, they have to stand a long sequence of depressing episodes. Miyazaki first shows this depressing image and makes us think, oh no, this world is hopeless. Then the scene suddenly turns into a bright blue sky, so the audience suddenly lightens up. You feel refreshed with the apocalyptic world suddenly turning into a clear blue sky. These clouds in the next scene, I'll show you a panel including 3 cuts. From the top image, it shows the white clouds sweeping the sky, shredding shadow over the toxic jungle. The forest full of fungus. Amazing sequence. You see the side view of the clouds, and then you see them in the bird's eye view to get the entire image. And from the shadow of the clouds over the toxic jungle, one white aircraft appears. And just when everyone realizes that this is the angel with wings, you get this zoom-in image. This glider in the zoomed-in image is gliding from the upper right toward the lower left. It shouldn't be depicted as gliding this way. If you do that, it's difficult to show that it's gliding. They pulled it delicately toward this side to show that it's gliding. They had no intention of showing high-speed gliding. Instead, they wanted to show rather floating quality. The white clouds shed shadows over the toxic jungle. The glider carrying Nausicaa called Maeve appears from the shadows of the clouds, and with the direction varying, in this scene, it's going this way. But when the scene changes, it's sliding laterally so you can feel the floating quality. And Nausicaa's face has not appeared yet. Then, the scene changes to show a close-up view of her, but without her face shown. Instead, it shows the blue sky again, while showing the posture of Nausicaa's flying over the toxic jungle down below. You see the jet nozzle, so you can realize that civilization has perished, but the humans did not lose everything. They even have jet engines. This small protrusions, this represents the genius of Miyazaki and mechanic design. What they do is that if Maeve makes a belly landing, this engine frame outside the engine may deform. The engine also serves as a nozzle, so the deformation will directly lead to heavily compromised injection efficiency. So ideally, it should have landing gears, but that was not an option. So he put these 2 antenna-like thingies. Miyazaki designs them to look like they are deformable and may be usable as aileron or as landing gears. This little detail helps to evade nosy questions like, how the hell is she able to balance on the aircraft with the body entirely serving as wings, which is supposed to be so unstable? These 2 protrusions provide various possibilities, such as they also serve as the landing gears, and they can be held by Nausicaa when boarding the aircraft, and can serve as aileron to counter such a question. Like this, I'm always astonished by how good Miyazaki designs aircrafts and machines. So we still haven't seen Nausicaa's face. She is flying. In the next scene, here it is. We see a giant warrior turn to stone. Maeve glides over it. The shadow of it moves across the warrior. All the movements are expressed with the shadow moving over other objects. This scene finally tells us what has happened to the giant warriors, which we already saw so much in the tapestry during the opening sequence. The huge giant warriors destroyed the world, and they ended up turning to stone and buried in the toxic jungle. And the girl is smoothly flying over it, so we can realize that the destruction was way back in the past. You see, this single scene alone tells us about the historical time flow in the tapestry of the opening sequence, the aftermath, and the elapse of time. The next scene where Glider lands and Nausicaa pulls out her rifle is also extremely well made, but I'll skip that. Nausicaa is carrying her gun on her shoulder, is just about to enter the forest, and the text directed by Hayao Miyazaki shows up to conclude the opening sequence. This is perfect. The entrance of Nausicaa into the woods is actually a contrast to the final scene. The final scene of this movie, Nausicaa entering the woods alone, and what he shows us in the closing sequence. The closing sequence is also fascinating. It's easier to understand what is going on in the opening sequence thanks to the tapestry guiding the audiences through the storyline. What's going on in the closing sequence is a little more difficult to comprehend, and I'll get to that in the second half. When we pay attention to each cut in the closing sequence, it tells you what the story of Nausicaa is all about. The resultant relationship among Tomekia, Pejai, and the Valley of the Wind. And that explains what Nausicaa is doing and what Yupa is doing. So the ending tells us a lot. However, we just finished watching an epic story and just say, and start paying attention to the closing credits. That's what we Japanese people do. We see text, we read it. That's why many people fail to properly comprehend the closing sequence. I'll get to that as well. Okay, so I guess that's about it for the opening sequence. About this, Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. Nah, never mind.